Hey guys, tonight we're wandering through the humid haze of an Aztec marketplace, the kind of place where your nose is assaulted by roasted maize burning copal incense. And wait, something bitter and strangely floral, it's hot chocolate. But not the cozy wintertime drink, you know. Nope. This stuff's thick, gritty, unsweetened and frothy. It's closer to a potion than a beverage. A wooden stick swirls rapidly in a clay cup, churning a foam so sacred it might just summon a god. There's a merchant yelling about rare cacao beans while a nobleman draped in jaguar pelts inspects them like a jeweller, squinting at a diamond. And in the background, a woman grinds roasted cacao with something reddish that definitely isn't sugar. You probably wouldn't last 5 minutes here, between the sun, the stench, and the shock of sipping what tastes like liquid fire. Still you're drawn in, lulled by the rhythm of pestles pounding stone, the hum of barter, the whisper that something divine might be brewing in that bowl. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's oddly soothing seeing who else is drifting off across the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the stalls, ducking under strings of drying maize and duck feathers, following your nose to a woman hawking what she calls xocolatl. Her voice is soft but firm. She's stirring something in a blackened pot that smells confusing. Bitter. Smoky. Is that chili? There's a pinkish foam building on the surface. You ask what's in it. She just smiles. In the Aztec world, xocolatl isn't a sweet treat, it's a stimulant, a status symbol, a spiritual offering. It's a drink of the elite and the divine. But more than that, it's a performance. Cacao, when whisked just right with a wooden stick called a molinillo, produces a thick, dense foam that was considered the most sacred part. If the foam vanished, so did the magic. People drank it before war, during ceremonies, even to seal important agreements. And no, you didn't gulp it like a warm bedtime beverage. You sipped it solemnly, reverently. Kind of like a modern espresso snob, but with more jaguar masks and fewer laptops. You might think the Aztecs worshipped cacao, and they sort of did. They believed it was a gift from Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god of wind learning and mildly terrifying art direction. Legend says he stole cacao from the gods and gave it to humans. You know, like a chocolate Prometheus, but scaly. Here's the kicker. What you're sipping in the marketplace likely has very little to do with chocolate, as we understand it. There's no sugar, no milk, no cozy marshmallows bobbing about. Instead, you've got crushed cacao beans mixed with water chili maize, and well, sometimes flowers, mushrooms, even tree bark. The taste, let's just say, complex. One contemporary account from Bernardino de Sahain, a Spanish friar, described over a dozen cacao drinks, some for energy, others for medicine, a few strictly for ceremony. And yes, some of those ceremonial versions might have included blood. But don't worry, not in your cup tonight, probably. Historians still argue whether these foamy brews were standardised across the empire or tailored to each region and rank. Did Montezuma drink the same thing as a merchant? Probably not. Did everyone agree on what made the best hot chocolate? Also, no. There were debates. Imagine an ancient Yelp page full of cacao reviews. Too much maize, not enough chili. 1 star. What's clear, though, is that the act of drinking cacao was layered in meaning. For commoners, it was rare. For nobles, it was routine. For warriors, it was fuel. For priests, it was sacred. And for you wandering this dusty market, it's a ticket into a world where taste, class and cosmology all swirl in a single clay cup. As you finally take a cautious sip, the foam clings to your upper lip like a ceremonial moustache. It's oddly energizing, strangely floral, and a little gritty. It warms your chest, but not with comfort, with power. You can see how someone might feel ready to fight a jaguar afterward. A boy nearby hawks cacao pods strung together like garlands. They're beautiful, red, yellow, almost glowing in the sunlight. You wonder how something so vibrant ends up brown and bitter. You'll find out later. But for now, You cradle your clay cup and sit under the shade of a broadleaf tree, foam tickling your lips, feeling just a little bit closer to the divine. You're still cradling that clay cup, the foam slowly melting into the drink, when a curious realization bubbles up in your mind. Those cacao beans you saw earlier weren't just food, they were money, literal currency. The Aztecs had no coins, no minted tender, clinking around in pockets. Instead, their economy ran on small oval-shaped, slightly wrinkled seeds. You glance at a market stall where a merchant is counting out cacao beans into a woven pouch. 10 beans might buy a tomato. 100 could get you a decent cloak, a turkey hen. They'll cost you a whopping 200 beans. You could easily blow your entire week's salary on a family dinner. And good luck if someone tries to slip you a counterfeit carved piece of clay or a filled shell masquerading as the real thing. Cacao fraud was a thing. Truly, some things never change. The empire was built on this strange economy. Tribute records show conquered provinces were required to send in tens of thousands of cacao beans each year to the capital city, Tenochtitlan. Imagine paying your taxes in snack form, except you couldn't snack on it. Not unless you were very, very wealthy or very, very rebellious. Cacao's value was deeply symbolic. It didn't just sit in a pouch or vault, it was offered to gods, used in ceremonies, buried with the dead. It was social, capital, edible power. Offering someone a drink of chocolate wasn't casual hospitality, it was a statement. Think of it as the ancient version of pouring a guest a glass of your finest wine, if that wine had also doubled as your rent money. Historians still debate whether cacao's use as currency came before or after its ceremonial role. Did people first worship it, then commodify it, or did its use as money lend it sacredness over time? The chicken and egg problem, but with beans and gods. The problem with using chocolate as money, of course, is that it's delicious, or at least it's energizing and addictive. That's like paying people in espresso shots or tiny bags of strong coffee grounds. Not exactly the safest way to hoard your wealth. One bad day and half your savings are in your stomach. And so cacao storage became an art in itself. Beans were dried, inspected sometimes, even sealed in jars to protect against moisture and mould. A rotten batch could destroy a merchant's fortune, which is probably why so many of the marketplace arguments you hear aren't about prices, they're about quality. You move toward a quieter stall, where a scribe is taking inventory. You overhear numbers: 500 beans, for a slave 75, for a small jug of oil. These aren't wild bartering guesses. This is a system, one that rivals some medieval coin economies in precision. But of course you can't just think of these as beans. That's far too modest a word for something that operated at the crossroads of food finance and faith. The cacao bean was a cultural keystone. Its value wasn't just intrinsic, it was performative. Just like the drink it produced, the bean's role shifted, with who held it, what it was used for, and how visibly it was exchanged. You wander deeper into the market and pause by a small shrine where cacao pods have been arranged like an offering. The priest has drawn symbols around them, in white chalk maybe, to bless the harvest, maybe to thank Quetzalcoatl. Either way, it's clear cacao was just grown, it was revered. And in that reverence lies its magic. This wasn't just money you could eat. It was power you could drink. It was status you could show off at banquets with different regions, offering their own special varietals, like fine wines. A noble woman nearby lifts a basket of especially dark, oily beans and declares them noble cacao from Xoconochcosom, of the most prized lands in the empire. A small crowd gathers. She doesn't offer samples. This is a flex, not a tasting. Even commoners got swept up in the drama of cacao. You spot a young boy trailing behind his father, proudly clutching a single bean like it's the most valuable object in the world. Which to him it probably is. Maybe hell spend it on a tamale, or maybe he's saving it dreaming of a day when hell own 100. You glance back at your now empty cup. That drink you had, it might have cost a couple dozen beans, maybe more if the ingredients were exotic. You sip the last gritty bit at the bottom, and and wonder how many small transactions just pass through your lips. And now that you know its worth, you're starting to feel a little guilty. That foam-pure money whisked into froth and swallowed without a second thought. Still lingering at the edge of the market, you notice a small crowd forming near a stone platform. Incense drifts through the air, curling like ghostly threads into the heat-shimmered sky. Something important is about to happen. You inch closer, careful not to bump into the richly dressed nobles, gathering with deliberate, almost theatrical grace. A priest in jaguar skins approaches the platform, holding a large obsidian bowl. The scent hits you, immediately smoky, bitter floral, and oddly metallic. It's xocolatl, but thicker, darker, with something pungent folded into the aroma. The drink seems alive, pulsing softly in the light. It's not for refreshment, this is ritual. One of the attendants steps forward carrying a basket with what appears to be feathers. No, closer inspection reveals they're soaked with something. Blood. You swallow. No marshmallows here. Welcome to the divine side of chocolate. In Aztec cosmology, cacao wasn't just a drink, it was sacred substance, linked directly to life force. It was associated with Tonacatecutli and Tonacachihuatl, the lord and lady of sustenance, and perhaps more famously with Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent who defied the divine order by giving cacao to humanity. Think of him as the original rebellious chef. This particular ceremony honours the gods, and cacao is the offering. A priest dips his fingers into the thick drink and flicks droplets toward a small idol carved with serpents. The crowd murmurs, heads bowed. A shell trumpet sounds in the distance. You're not here for entertainment, this is communion. Historians still debate the full scope of cacao's religious role. Was it reserved for blood rituals? Did warriors drink it before battle as a symbolic anointing? Or was it also a ceremonial bridge between social classes? What's clear is that this wasn't your average breakfast beverage. There are surviving codices like the Florentine Codex that describe cacao mixed with human blood in sacred rituals. Not gallons, mind you, just a few drops usually from a self-inflicted wound or a sacrificial animal. Still, it paints a picture. This was not sip and chill territory. This was high-stakes theology in a cup. You notice a woman across from you clutching a small gourd filled with a different brew. Hers is tinged red, decorated with marigold petals, and a slice of white root, possibly ololiuqui, a hallucinogenic seed often used by shamans. She stares ahead, unblinking. It's clear this drink isn't just for the gods. It's for vision, for revelation. You wonder what it's like to drink something meant to bridge worlds, to swallow a potion not for flavour, but for favour. The priests believed that the foamies, the same foam you enjoyed earlier, carried the soul of the cacao. It rose to the top like spirit rising from flesh. That's why the foam was offered first. To drink it was to absorb a god's breath. This moment is quiet, sacred, and then just like that the bowl is empty. The priest steps back. The spell lifts. The nobles murmur soft blessings and drift away like leaves caught in an afternoon breeze. You're left blinking, adjusting to the shift. The air still smells of burnt copal and faint bitterness. You spot a boy licking the rim of an empty cacao bolno ceremony. For him, just a treat. You move away, footsteps slow. You can't help but marvel at how chocolate, this thing so common now that you can buy it in vending machines, was once a key to the heavens. A bridge between earth and sky. A medium through which gods were thanked, warriors were blessed, and people believed they could momentarily become divine. And let's be honest, you've never felt that after a hot cocoa with whipped cream. There's something soothing, almost sleepy in the realization that ancient people didn't just use food for fuel, they used it for meaning, for connection, for stories, for spirit. You walk a little slower now, your shadow long behind you. The priest's chants still echo faintly, in your ears like ripples in a still lake. You're full not in the belly, but in the soul. Or at least, the part of the soul that wonders what secrets were once carried in a single clay cup. You've wandered past the ceremonial space now, but the scent of cacao still lingers in the folds of your cloak, or maybe that's just your imagination. You reach a quieter part of the city where the pace slows and the air is filled not with chants and ritual, but with the steady tuk-tuk-tuk of preparation. This is the neighbourhood of the grinders. Here, under shaded awnings and beside blackened hearths, women kneel over large stone slabs, metatis pushing stone rollers across cacao paste in hypnotic rhythm. You crouch near one, careful not to startle her, and she doesn't even look up. She's focused. You watch the paste develop its glossy sheen under her hands, a labour of pressure and heat. It's more like sculpting than cooking. Now the magic trick. From a nearby shelf, she picks up a slender carved wooden stick, the molinillo. It's surprisingly elegant, almost like a toy. She drops it into a clay pot filled with the cacao mixture, adds water, and begins to roll it between her palms, like she's warming her hands. The result is immediate and mesmerising. A thick layer of foam builds at the surface. Not bubbles, this isn't frothy like milk. It's creamy, structured, almost architectural. A mousse made without machines. Aztecs didn't boil their chocolate. That would have been barbaric. The water was added cold, or at most lukewarm, preserving the volatile aromatics and bitterness. And the foam, that's the main event. The rest is just the stage. This wasn't just technique, it was status. The better the foam, the more impressive the drink. Some households even trained servants to produce the foam with precise flicks of the wrist. There were competitions, gossip, probably the occasional foam-based bragging match. Oh, your foam only lasts a minute, ours floats for 10. You try your hand with a spare molinillo. It's harder than it looks. The rhythm matters. Too fast and you splatter it. Too slow and it won't lift. After a few awkward attempts and a splashed tunic, you give up and return to spectating. One elder explains that the foam represents breath, divine breath life, breath soul rising. This foam wasn't stirred in. It was coaxed. You didn't just make it. You invited it like a spirit. Historians still argue whether the molinillo was a common household item or a specialty tool reserved for elite kitchens. Some believe the tradition goes even further back, inherited from the Maya, whose cacao rituals were equally elaborate, if not more so. The Aztecs might have adapted and evolved the method, but the essence was the same. The drink wasn't complete until it had a crown. You sip again, curious how just foam could taste like anything. It does. It's concentrated, somehow richer. It coats your tongue in a way the liquid doesn't. There's even a word in Nahuatl for this sacred foam, xocolatl. Yep, same as the drink, but some say the term originally referred to the froth specifically, which means maybe we've been translating it wrong all along. Behind you, two young girls are giggling as they practice with their own molinillos. One gets a bubble, the other gets a scolding from a nearby aunt for splashing too much. It's a domestic scene, but full of importance. These aren't just kitchen games. They're rehearsals in heritage. You lean back against a sun-warmed wall and close your eyes, letting the steady scrape of grinding stones and gentle patter of whisks lull your senses. There's a rhythm to it all, a meditation. This isn't production, it's ritual wrapped in routine. Like making tea in Japan or kneading bread in rural France. You remember the foam from earlier in the sacred ritual, and now here it is again, in a quiet corner of the city. The same symbol, different context, but still revered. Because whether you're a priest summoning gods or a grandmother preparing a family breakfast, foam matters. The sun has started to dip low now, casting long golden beams across the streets of Tenochtitlan. You follow the smell of something earthy, spiced warm, and vaguely floral to a quieter lane, where vendors are packing up. But a few linger, selling cups of chocolatl to passers-by, each drink more peculiar than the last. You pause at a small stall, where a man with weathered hands grinds something that definitely isn't cacao. It's light grey and woody. He mixes it into a paste and nods toward the clay jug, simmering beside him. Cacao with quachilpili, he says casually. Tree bark for the stomach. You smile, trying not to look suspicious. You've stumbled into the part of the story that most people overlook, the mix-ins, because Aztec hot chocolate wasn't just chocolate. In fact, sometimes it barely resembled what you'd consider chocolate at all. The cacao base was just that, a base, a canvas. What came next was limited only by geography availability and taste or medicinal purpose. One popular addition was maize, yep, corn, not as syrup or sweetener, but as roasted ground meal mixed into the drink. It made the xocolotl thicker, heartier, and depending on the household, either better or just cheap filler. Think of it as turning your coffee into oatmeal, functional if not luxurious. Then there was chili, a lot of chili. One type chilacuatl was favoured for its heat and depth, especially in warriors' drinks. A spicy chocolate drink may sound gourmet now, but back then it was just a morning booster, a pre-battle gut kick. You duck under a low thatched roof, where a woman stirs her own concoction. She beckons you closer, and you notice something unexpected floating in the pot flower petals. Not just decorative, she's using iztauhiatl, a fragrant blossom believed to calm the stomach and clarify dreams. One sip, she claims, and your dreams will feel like stories you can walk through. Some cacao drinks were frothy, others flat. Some were warm, many were served cold, especially in the lowlands. But almost none were sweet. Sugar hadn't arrived yet. So instead, the Aztecs used other ingredients to add flavour or symbolic value: honey, if you were lucky, vanilla, if you were wealthier, an acacia red seed for colour and supposed aphrodisiac power. Yes, even in the ancient world, people were trying to jazz up their love life through smoothies. Historians still argue whether some of these ingredients were chosen for taste or for ritual. Take mushrooms, for example. Teonancatl, or flesh of the gods, was sometimes added to cacao during festivals or ceremonies. It wasn't exactly a cosy bedtime drink. It was more of a see the gods and talk to your ancestors kind of experience. You spot a woman selling small gourd cups, labelled with painted symbols. You ask her which one is best for sleep. She taps one marked with a crescent moon and offers it to you with a sly smile. Inside is a blend of cacao cornmeal and crushed passion flower, mildly sedative, she claims. You sip it. It's smooth, surprisingly mellow, almost like warm pudding mixed with dark tea. It's striking how versatile these drinks are. One brew invigorates a warrior, another puts a child to sleep. One calls to the gods, one calms a fever. Each recipe is like a song composed differently for every season, reason, and person. And this versatility means cacao wasn't just a single thing. It was a spectrum, a practice, a conversation between people, plants, and purpose. You could craft a drink to impress a guest, treat an illness, or even prepare for a marriage proposal. Imagine a love confession delivered with a steaming bowl of vanilla-laced, chili-spiked cacao, spicy and sincere. You sip again, the passion flower beginning to work its quiet magic. The buzz of the city fades slightly at the edges. Everything feels a little softer, a little rounder. The barky bitterness in your cup isn't unpleasant. It's grounding. A child nearby complains that her cacao is too thick. Her father leans down and says, "Good. That means it's strong." You smile. It's the kind of domestic wisdom that doesn't show up in textbooks. The cup in your hand is nearly empty now. You swirl it, watching the dregs dance lazily. What was in that mix? Maize, probably. Maybe a hint of chili. A little bark, a touch of flour, and not a drop of sugar. And yet it's satisfying, it's real, it's ancient. You realise something funny. The secret ingredient in Aztec hot chocolate might not be one thing at all, but the idea that it could be everything. Evening settles across the rooftops of Tenochtitlan, painting the canals in ribbons of amber. The city slows but never truly sleeps. In the palace district, life continues with a different rhythmone of luxury ceremony and measured indulgence. You're lucky tonight. A passing courier mistakes you for a junior scribe and waves you into the side gate of an elite compound. You shrug and go along with it. After all, it's not every day you're invited to witness an Aztec royal banquet. Inside, servants glide along polished stone floors with trays balanced high, and on nearly every tray, cacao. But this isn't the foamy bark-infused brew from the market. No, this is elite chocolate, ceremonial, dressed to impress. You sneak toward a quiet corner, where a young steward is preparing a special pot. You ask him what's in it. He grins and lists ingredients, like he's casting a spell: cacao, chilacatl, pepper ground maize honey, and something he simply calls tlilxochitl, the black flower. You blink. Wait, that's vanilla. But not the sugary essence, you know. This one's smoky, resinous, strangely floral. This is where chocolate becomes something else entirely. At the centre of the room sits Montezuma himself, or Moctezuma II if we're being formal, the emperor of emperors, a god in human form. And in front of him, a tower of gold cups. Some say he drinks a xocolatl from them before addressing his court. Others whisper that each cup contains a different variation of cacao for each mood, invigoration, reflection, even seduction. According to the Spanish chronicler Bernal das del Castillo, Montezuma drank as many as 50 cups of chocolate a day. 50. That's either devotion or the world's worst caffeine addiction. Historians still argue whether that number is exaggerated. Some suggest it was symbolic, others believe it includes ceremonial sips instead of full servings. Either way, it paints a vivid picture of cacao's centrality in imperial life. You watch the emperor lift a cup to his lips. It's a rich red vessel, encrusted with jade. He doesn't sip casually. He drinks with purpose, with poise. Around him, nobles shift in anticipation, waiting for the next course or decree. And it's not just the emperor. Everyone here drinks chocolate: priests, generals, musicians, even favoured slaves. But each drink is tailored. One noblewoman prefers hers thickened with amaranth. A general requests his laced with chili and deer marrow. Yes, marrow. As in bone. You try not to make a face. The drinks are warm, but not hot. The Aztecs rarely boiled, their cacao heat was for the sun, and the forge not for divine liquids. Warmth is enough to loosen the flavours, to wake the nose. You're handed a cup by a silent servant. It's heavier than you expect. Inside, the cacao is mixed with a bluish paste. Tliltzin, she whispers. Charcoal and ash. Cleansing for the spirit. You sip cautious. It tastes dusty, but not unpleasant, like drinking a memory. Nearby, a group of musicians strike up a soft rhythmic tune. The mood shifts. The emperor relaxes. The nobles laugh. The cacao has done its work. What's remarkable is how much intention goes into every variation. Each cup is more than a drink, it's an identity. The ingredients speak to rank region belief. One drink might hail from the humid coasts, another from the highland valleys. Each is a statement, a performance in a cup. And then things get strange. A priest approaches with a tray bearing only 3 small bowls. He offers them to the emperor and 2 high-ranking nobles. You strain to see the contents. The brew is unusually thick, almost syrupy, and emits an aroma that makes your temples pulse. That's tliltzin, again someone whispers behind you, but with mushrooms and nightshade. Ah, we're in the hallucinogenic chapter of this evening. Such drinks weren't common. They were reserved for specific rituals, private visions, or important transitions, coronations, death's omens. To drink this kind of cacao was to step into another world entirely, a spiritual backstage pass. You glance back at Montezuma. He stares into his cup for a long moment before drinking. Not all at once, slowly, steadily, like descending into a warm pool. The room quiets. Historians still debate the regularity of hallucinogens in Aztec court life. Were these brews used weekly, seasonally only, for priests, only for kings? The records are inconsistent, filtered through Spanish eyes, some scandalized, others fascinated. But tonight in this candle-lit room, you feel the weight of it. This isn't indulgence, it's ritual. These drinks aren't just refreshment. They're navigation tools for the soul. And here you are sipping yours like a tourist at a sacred tasting menu. Eventually the music softens again. The laughter returns. The emperor rises and the trays are cleared. Your cup is empty, maybe thankfully so. The ash still lingers on your tongue, chalky and grounding. You step outside the night, cool against your face. The stars overhead are crisp, glittering above the dark mirror of Lake Texcoco. Inside that golden cup, Montezuma wasn't just drinking chocolate. He was drinking power, memory, magic, and perhaps a bit of madness. The moon hangs high now, casting a pale shimmer over the great city of Tenochtitlan. From your vantage point on a quiet stone balcony, you watch the reflection ripple across the lake like spilled silver. The city murmurs in its sleep, and yet somewhere in the palace, Montezuma is probably still awake, maybe on his 50th cup of cacao. Or his 5th, who really knows? Let's talk about that for a moment. The infamous legend goes like this: Montezuma II, emperor of the mighty Aztec Empire, drank up to 50 cups of xocolotl a day, especially before visiting his many wives. The implication was obvious even to the prudish chroniclers. This was a virility booster, a royal pre-game ritual. But how true is it? Historians still argue whether this account, primarily recorded by Spanish invaders like Bernaldaz del Castillo, and later exaggerated by European writers, was a factual detail or a colonial fantasy. Was Montezuma truly that fond of the frothy stuff? Or was this part of a broader European habit of portraying foreign rulers as decadent and strange? Let's take a breath and imagine the logistics. 50 cups. That's a lot. Even if each one was small like an espresso shot, that's still a stomach full of bitter-spiced, non-sweetened cacao. No sugar, no milk, no fluff, just potent, gritty, occasionally chili-laced intensity. Could anyone drink that much? Well, perhaps. Cacao in its raw form isn't just a drink, it's a stimulant. It contains theobromine, a close chemical cousin to caffeine, but gentler and longer lasting. It would have kept the emperor alert, energized, and possibly a bit jittery. But again, 50. You lean back, imagining Montezuma perched on a jade throne, attendants rushing to refill his gold cups, each drink tailored with different herbs sown with cornmeal, another with achiote, a third with vanilla, and a fourth maybe for ceremony. You picture a royal menu of xocolal flavours, like a sommelier dream gone slightly unhinged. The idea might be exaggerated, but the purpose behind it likely wasn't. Cacao was status. The act of drinking, so much of it wasn't about thirst, it was about display, power, ritual. Whether or not he hit the 50-cup mark, Montezuma absolutely used cacao to reinforce his majesty. He offered it to visitors. He used it in court ceremonies. He drank it before council meetings, diplomatic receptions, and yes, perhaps before visiting the harem. But more than indulgence, cacao was embedded into the very architecture of power. You think back to the tribute system, the vast network of regions across the empire required to pay taxes not in coin, but in goods. And cacao was always high on that list. Coastal regions, especially the warm and humid province of Soconochco, were prized for their rich cacao harvests. These beans travelled long distances, carried on the backs of porters, or floated down rivers on reed rafts, all so the emperor could maintain his lavish habit. You can almost hear the shuffle of sandals as tribute bearers arrive in the capital, hunched under the weight of woven baskets filled with dried beans. Some of them probably never even tasted the drink themselves. The empire functioned in part on this exchange labour for luxury. It's not unlike today, you think, as you sip the modern equivalent of fair trade single origin chocolate from an overpriced caf. Maybe Montezuma was the original hipster, just 2,000 years ahead of his time. And yet there's something oddly human in this. The idea of someone, even a king, craving something warm and familiar, something ritualistic. You begin to wonder whether Montezuma ever grew tired of it. Did he ever sigh and think, not another cacao cup? Did he sneak off for a plain tamale when no one was looking? You'll never know. But as you lean on the cool stone railing, watching fireflies drift between lily pads, in the lake below, you realise this, the story of Montezuma's 50-cup habit, is just about excess. It's about the way humans, then, and now use small comforts to build empires around us, rituals to give shape to power, and sometimes to shield us from it. You descend from the palace district, now stepping back into the arteries of the city, where night merchants light small fires to fend off the dusk. The scent of roasted maize mingles with the familiar bitterness of cacao drifting from a row of stalls. You pause gaze, wandering toward one of the larger buildings, part granary, part tax station, part warehouse. This is where things get truly fascinating. You've heard whispers about this place all evening. It's where the empire stored its chocolate. Well, not chocolate exactly, cacao beans. Tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. Collected not through trade, but through obligation. Taxes. Let's rewind. The Aztec Empire, for all its spiritual depth and cosmological complexity, ran a finely tuned machine of tribute collection. Instead of coin, regional governors sent textiles, feathers, maize, obsidian, and yes, cacao beans. The Codex Mendoza, one of the most detailed post-conquest records, lists exact figures. Some provinces owed 40,000 cacao beans at a time. It was as precise as a spreadsheet minus Excel. You peek inside the warehouse and see bundles of cacao stored in clay pots and tightly woven sacks labelled with crude symbols. Some indicate quality, others the region of origin. There's even a system for beans used in rituals versus those meant for trade. It's not chaos, it's inventory. But here's where it gets even more interesting. These beans didn't just sit around waiting to be made into drinks. The state redistributed them. They went to warriors as rewards, to temple priests for offerings, and to elite households as part of their food stipend. You can't help but smile. The empire basically ran a chocolate welfare program. A young man nearby, probably an assistant scribe, rattles off a list as beans are counted and weighed. A woman marks quantities with charcoal strokes on a wall. Every 10th mark gets a ceremonial slash through a neat system, efficient and ancient. Historians still debate how centralised this system was. Did every tribute reach the capital? Were some regions allowed to trade locally instead? Some argue that cacao beans lost value in certain seasons when supply surged. Others believe the empire used overflow beans for festivals or diplomatic gifts. Regardless, the picture is clear. Cacao was more than a symbol. It was infrastructure. It held up the walls of the empire, one sack at a time. You spot a quiet side alcove with broken pottery and a mound of shriveled beans, clearly rejected or spoiled. Even chocolate has its rejects. You wonder who makes that call. Who decides which beans are imperial and which go to waste? Even in paradise, someone's sorting the inventory. It's easy to forget how physical this all is. No spreadsheets, no apps. Just hands, rough, calloused, practiced sorting, tasting, sniffing. Beans were sometimes bitten to test for freshness. Yes, people bit their money. Another reminder that cacao sat at the strange crossroads between economy and appetite. You leave the warehouse and follow a porter walking a narrow street. He carries 2 sacks of cacao on his back, each worth more than a month's labour. He moves slowly, not just from the weight, but from the awareness. You can see it in his posture. He's carrying more than beans. Back in the market, you catch a conversation between 2 merchants arguing over bean counts. One claims to have imperial grade stock. The other scoffs and says his comes straight from Zokanokko, sun-dried under royal supervision. You're not sure if it's a sales pitch or genuine pride. Either way, you don't interrupt. The more you listen, the more you realise this wasn't just a system of tribute, it was a web of identity. Regional cacao had flavours, textures, reputations. Like wines or cheeses, today people knew where their favourite beans came from. One region might be prized for its smoky depth, another for its floral bitterness. And yes, there were fakes, shaved pebbles, hollowed out pods, even dyed seeds. The empire had to enforce cacao integrity with harsh penalties. You chuckle, there was probably a cacao inspector somewhere walking the streets sniffing for fraud. You pause under a large mural painted along a building wall. It shows a caravan bringing cacao beans to the capital porters, warriors, nobles, priests, all connected by tiny humble seeds. You think of how many hands touch a single bean before it becomes a drink. It's dizzying and kind of beautiful. Because in the end, the great Aztec Empire didn't just run on gold or conquest. It ran on something far earthier, grittier, slightly bitter, foamy. And it all starts in those silent warehouses where the beans rest in sacks waiting to become tribute to transactioner transformation. As dawn teases the edges of the city, you find yourself far from the palaces and plazas, deep in the countryside, where the cacao trees grow. The hum of insects fills the air, mingled with birdsong, and the rhythmic sound of machetes slicing through dense foliage. Welcome to the beginning of the cacao's journey, from jungle tree to drinking bowl. Cacao doesn't grow just anywhere, it's picky. It needs humidity, shade and warmth. That's why the southern provinces, especially Xoconoco, were prized. Their jungles were the empire's chocolate gardens. You follow a small team of farmers, or Kalmakak labourers more accurately, who are harvesting cacao pods from the trees. The pods are football-sized, ridged like dragon eggs, and range in colour from deep green to bright crimson. Some are even speckled gold. You reach out and feel the waxy skin. It's heavy, full of promise. One farmer splits a pod open with practiced ease. Inside, the beans glisten, embedded in a sweet white pulp that smells faintly like lychee. This isn't the chocolate yet. This is just the beginning. The beans are scooped out, pulp and all, and piled into woven baskets. From there, they're left to ferment. Yes, ferment. Not in vats or barrels, but in baskets covered with banana leaves. The process takes several days, during which the beans sweat, heat up, and begin their transformation. This step is critical. Without it, the beans wouldn't develop their trademark bitterness or depth. Think of it as chocolate puberty. You lean in and catch a whiff, sour, fruity, yeasty. Not exactly mouth-watering, but strangely complex. The beans are alive, changing. Historians still debate how much the Aztecs understood about fermentation. Was it intentional science or just inherited practice? Some suggest they learned it from the Maya, who had been fermenting cacao centuries earlier. Others think it was simply the best way to keep beans from spoiling. Either way, it worked. After fermentation, the beans are dried under the sun. Labourers spread them across flat stones, flipping them with wooden paddles to ensure even drying. You watch this for a while, hypnotised by the scraping rhythm. It's slow work, careful. The sun is relentless, but so are they. Once dried, the beans are roasted not in ovens, but in clay pans over open fire. The scent changes again. Now it's rich, smoky, almost familiar. Finally, they're cracked and winnowed. The outer shells are discarded, and the inner nibs, the good stuff air, ground into paste on metates. You remember that rhythmic grinding sound from earlier. Now you understand it better. It's the culmination of jungle and fire, of sun and sweat. That paste is more than just an ingredient, a distillation of the land. A young boy offers you a nib to taste. You pop it in your mouth and bite down. Bitter, intense, but there's a slow bloom of flavour notes of earth smoke and a faint citrus tang. You nod, eyes wide. He grins proudly. Later, you sit with one of the elders as she prepares a pot of xocolatl. She walks you through each step, every movement deliberate. The paste is mixed with water not boiling, just warm and whisked with a molinillo until the foam rises. She adds chilacatl chili and a pinch of ground maize. You sip. It tastes different here at the source. Fresher, wilder, more alive. Maybe it's the setting. Maybe it's the absence of city dust. Maybe it's the fact that this drink has come full circle from tree to cup without a single shortcut. Historians still argue whether the Aztecs valued the process of chocolate making or simply the final product. Was it sacred because of how it was made or because of what it became? You suspect the answer is both. Because standing here, under the thick jungle canopy, watching smoke rise from the hearth, you feel it, the weight of every step, the intention in every motion, the knowledge passed from hand to hand, generation to generation. Chocolate wasn't just made, it was grown, fermented, roasted, ground, frothed, shared. And here, far from the palace and the markets, and the myths, you realise that maybe the most sacred part of Aztec chocolate wasn't the ceremony or the royalty. It was the quiet labour of those who coaxed magic from trees. You leave the groves and drying stones behind, returning to the urban heart of Tenochtitlan, where people bustle through the morning haze like ants in a sunbeam. But now your eyes are different. You've seen the full journey of the cacao bean, from pod to potion, and it's given new weight to everything around you. As you pass through the maze of dwellings, you begin to notice something. Most of the grinding stones, the metatessa, occupied not by men, but by women. Their knees pressed to woven mats, their arms moving in smooth, powerful arcs day in and day out. These are the true engineers of Xocolatl. You step into a courtyard where 3 generations are working in quiet rhythm. The grandmother grinds, the daughter froths, the young girl fans the fire. It's an everyday scene, but there's reverence in it. Even when no one's watching, the chocolate is made with care. Cacao may have been divine, ceremonial and imperial, but someone still had to make it. And here's the truth few stories mention. In Aztec society, the labour of preparing cacao fell heavily on women. Whether grinding beans for daily use or for high ceremonies, they were the hands behind the froth. And that meant power, but also pressure. The drink had to be just right. The foam had to rise, the paste had to be smooth, the flavour balanced. If it curdled, if it separated. That wasn't just a failed drink, it could be seen as a bad omen. Or worse, an insult. You overhear a woman scolding her niece gently, but firmly. Don't use too much water. The cacao will sulk. You smile. Even the beans have moods. Some stories, mostly told second-hand by Spanish chroniclers, say that if a wife served her husband spoiled cacao, it could be grounds for divorce. That may be myth, or it may reflect the deeper social code surrounding food. Historians still debate the severity of such rules, but what's certain is that Xocolatl wasn't just a drink, it was a test of skill and care. And gender. Because while the emperors and warriors drank the chocolate, it was the women, mothers, wives, daughters, even slaves who made it. Some households had enslaved women trained specifically for the task, and their performance could influence their standing in the home. A good chocolate maker wasn't just useful, she was respected. You pause beside a quiet home where a girl no older than 9 is working a small matata. Her mother watches silently, correcting only when necessary. The girl grinds slowly, then faster, finding a rhythm. It's like learning to dance, but with elbows and wrists. You wonder if she knows she's continuing a 1,000-year-old tradition. In wealthier homes, there were servants for this job. In poorer homes, women did it themselves, sometimes rising before dawn, just to start the daily grind literally. The process could take hours, roasting, grinding, mixing, whisking, serving. And yet there's a grace in it. This wasn't thankless work. It was intimate, ritualized, woven into the fabric of domestic life. It was how a mother showed love, how a hostess showed hospitality, how a girl grew into a woman. But as with everything else, it wasn't always peaceful. Some records mention arguments, jealousies, even poisonings linked to Xocolatl. A scorned wife might slip something bitter into a rival's cup. A servant could sabotage a master's brew. You raise an eyebrow. Chocolate as both love potion and revenge tool. Deliciously dramatic. And while this might sound like gossip, the Spanish took it seriously. They eventually banned cacao in nunneries after rumours spread of young women using it to rebel, disrupt or flirt. Even in colonial times, the gendered politics of chocolate remained alive. You step into a shaded corner and watch a woman pass a cup to her husband. He drinks silently, then nods. She smiles barely. But in that small gesture, you see it all: effort, history, expectation. Because this isn't just sustenance, it's communication. A well-made cup of Xocolatl says, I honour you. I remember the recipe. I carry the knowledge. And in a world where memory was sacred, where lineage and myth entwined in every household that mattered. So next time you unwrap a chocolate bar, maybe pause and think, not of Montezuma or the gods, but of a woman in a smoky courtyard, grinding roasted beans before sunrise. She doesn't know you, but in a way you're sipping her story. You're back near the bustling lakefront when a wave of shouting breaks through the morning air. A ship is docking one of the large, Calicano-like vessels made for transporting tribute and trade goods along the canals. But this isn't just any boat. This one bears foreigners. Not Spaniards, at least not yet. These are traders from far-flung regions of Mesoamerica, welcomed into the great market of Tlatelolco, the largest in the empire. You drift toward the crowd drawn by a scent both familiar and strange. It's chocolatl, but sweeter and smokier. Turns out even within the Aztec world, chocolate was far from uniform. Regional styles varied. The Zapotecs preferred theirs thick with ground seeds. The Totonacs liked floral notes, possibly an early use of vanilla. One trader pours you a cup with toasted cornmeal, honey and ground flowers. It's smooth, calming, and dare you say, it almost sweet. But this pleasant moment won't last, because not long from now, the chocolate will change. The Spanish are coming. You blink and time speeds forward. Tenochtitlan is on the edge of collision. The year is 1519, and Herne Courts has just stumbled upon something he doesn't quite understand: a city larger than most in Europe canals. Instead of streets, temples, taller than cathedrals, and people sipping a bitter black drink like it's liquid gold. The Spaniards try it, and they hate it. According to their journals, the first sips of chocolatl are met with disgust. Too bitter, too gritty, too weird. They're used to sweet wines, not spiced earthy drinks that foam like potions. One friar calls it a bitter drink for barbarians. Another, perhaps more poetic, says it tastes like soot and pepper. But give it a few months and things change. They see how the nobility drink it, how cacao beans are traded like money, how Montezuma sips it from gold cups, and most importantly, they see how energizing it is. Theobromine and caffeine work their magic even on skeptical conquistadors. And so, like many colonial stories, resistance turns to obsession. The Spanish begin experimenting. They take the Aztec base and begin adjusting it to European palates. They heat it more. They add cinnamon imported from Asia. And crucially, they add sugar. That one change alters the entire trajectory of chocolate history. What was once a bitter, sacred, foamy drink of kings becomes a hot, sweet beverage served in porcelain cups across Spain. Historians still argue who first thought to sweeten chocolatl. Some say it happened in Mexico. Others claim it was perfected in the Spanish court. Either way, within a generation, the frothy black brew is barely recognizable. It's on its way to becoming the hot chocolate we know today, though the marshmallows are still a few centuries off. You sip a modern version, now in your mind tracing its lineage. That little swirl of sweetness in your cup, it's part Aztec, part Spanish, part colonial experiment. But here's the thing: the Aztecs didn't lose cacao. They just lost control over its meaning. Where it once symbolized the soul, the divine, and the empire's structure, it now became something for profit, for pleasure, for novelty. European elites drank it for health, then for status, and eventually for fun. And yet something survived. Because even with new ingredients, different ceremonies, and strange new tongues, the essence of the drink, the cacao itself, remained. Transported, transformed, but not forgotten. You walk along the dock now, watching crates of cacao being packed, some for tribute, some for trade, some eventually for ships that will leave these shores and never return. Chocolate's world is about to get bigger, much bigger, but it will always remember its roots in jungle groves, in grinding stones, in sacred rituals, and yes, in the scrunched faces of conquistadors tasting their first bitter sip. You sit near a small fire now tucked under a sloping roof, where old merchants whisper about the changes. The city still stands for now, but there's something in the air. Tenochtitlan feels watched. Traded cacao has begun to shift hands more frequently. Strange foreign coins jingle in pouches once full of beans. And the chocolate. It's becoming something different entirely. A few stalls down, someone pours you a cup of this new chocolatl. It's warmer than usual. There's cinnamon in it, definitely not native, and something else that clings to your teeth. Sugar. You raise an eyebrow. It's pleasant, but jarring. You're tasting history mid-transformation. When the Spanish began adapting cacao to suit their tastes, They didn't just change the recipe, they changed the entire meaning. What had been ritual, sacred and social suddenly became commercial, exportable, and eventually recreational. Back in Spain, chocolate took off quickly, though not without confusion. Clergymen debated whether drinking it broke the fasting rules. It wasn't solid, but it wasn't water either. Historians still argue over how many church debates were held over what was essentially a frothy smoothie. And then came the aristocrats. European nobility embraced hot chocolate as a luxury. It was expensive, foreign, slightly exotic, everything a fashionable court could want. Chocolate houses opened much like coffee houses later, would offering thick, rich brews, served in ornate porcelain. Gone was the frothing stick. In came silver spoons. Gone were the jaguar priests and feathered attendants. In came liveried servants and powdered wigs. You can almost hear the clinking of cups in Versailles, the idle gossip of courtiers sipping something that once fueled warriors and summoned gods. But here's the part few talk about as chocolate spread through Europe. Its origins were rewritten. The Aztec roots were acknowledged, yes, but filtered through colonial romanticism. Montezuma became a character in a moral tale, either a noble savage or a decadent failure, depending on the teller. The chocolate itself, it was stripped of its spiritual layers and repackaged as a health tonic, a delicacy, a drink for thinkers. A 17th century English doctor once claimed it could fortify the stomach-aid conception and banish melancholy, which is arguably the most flattering product description chocolate has ever received. And yet beneath this polished European sheen, the original xocolotl endured in whispers. Among indigenous families, old recipes persisted, blends passed down from grandmother to granddaughter, cacao still used in rituals, marriages, burials, still frothed by hand, still bitter, still sacred. But now there was a rift. There was Aztec chocolate, and there was colonial chocolate. One a drink of gods, the other a drink of guests. You sip again, the cinnamon tickling your tongue. It's good, it really is, but it lacks that grounding edge, the smoky bark, the sting of Chile, the whispered history that clung to the foam. You miss the grit, the texture, the bite of something ancient. A merchant nearby opens a crate packed with sacks of cacao and sugar, bound for Vera Cruz, from there to Seville, from there who knows. You picture a dock worker in Amsterdam, a ship's cook in Lisbon, a monk in Milanol, sipping this evolving brew, unaware they're holding centuries of spiritual, economic and culinary heritage in their hands. And you can't help but wonder, does it matter if they forget? Maybe. But then again, chocolate has a memory of its own. Its bitterness always carries a whisper of what came before. Its richness tells stories even when the tongue's drinking it. Forget the names. Every cup, even sweetened and modernized, still echoes with jungle groves and obsidian cups, with grinding stones and whispered blessings, with the quiet truth that even the most comforting things, like warm chocolate, often carry the taste of something lost. Night drapes itself gently over the old city once more, and the scent of cacao is now more memory than presence. You wander toward the harbour where ships once brought missionaries, traders, and soon enough contraband. Because as chocolate became more valuable, it also became something else entirely, something worth stealing. The age of exploration, they called it, but for many it was the age of appropriation. And where there was chocolate, there was competition, smuggling, espionage, even piracy. Yes, you heard that right. The same drink once used in sacred Aztec rituals became the cause of secret shipments and cannon fire. You settle by a crackling fire near a group of old dock workers who share stories about barrels of dried cacao beans hidden beneath false bottoms. Jesuits, those meticulous missionaries, weren't just spreading the gospel. They were quietly developing cacao plantations across the Americas, Venezuela, Ecuador, the Caribbean. Why? Because they knew what was coming. Demand. In Europe, chocolate was exploding in popularity, and the beans, like gold and silver, became precious, worth fighting for, worth hiding. The Spanish wanted a monopoly. The Dutch wanted in. The French and English soon followed. and suddenly cacao wasn't just a bean, it was a battleground. One story sticks out. A French privateer allegedly raided a Spanish galleon, not for gold, but for sacks of cacao. At first, the sailors thought the pirates were mad. Who steals beans? But those beans were worth more than coin on the black market in Europe. Historians still argue whether the pirate raids were part of formal trade wars or just opportunistic looting. Some say cacao was so valuable in certain Caribbean ports that it was accepted as payment in taverns and brothels. You close your eyes and picture it a smoky, rum-soaked tavern. In Martinique, a tired sailor slamming a pouch of cacao onto the bar in exchange for a warm meal and a soft bed. No coins, just beans. Meanwhile, back in New Spain, the Jesuits were busy cultivating new hybrid cacao strains, adapting Mesoamerican farming methods to European agricultural models. They kept journals, recipes, even plantation logs. Some still survive. The irony is thick. The same religious orders that helped crush native beliefs also preserved parts of the very culinary culture they displaced. You pause at that, because while cacao spread the people who first cultivated and ritualized it, the Maya, the Mixtec, the Aztec were being erased from the new chocolate narrative. Their knowledge was borrowed, but their names were not. A boy by the fire breaks your reverie. He's chewing on a raw cacao bean face scrunched with playful disgust. It's better roasted, he mutters. You laugh and nod. True then true now. Later, you follow a narrow street to a storage shed filled with crates. Some are labelled in Nahuatl, others in Spanish, a few in scribbled French. The beans inside are dry papery and precious. These aren't just cargo, they're cultural DNA. In the shadows you find a tiny ledge where someone has carved a symbol into the wood, a stylized cacao pod with a serpent coiled around it. Quetzalcoatl or a forgotten trader's marken. Either way, it tells you this even amidst colonial trade, violent takeover, and whispered deals under moonlight, someone remembered where it started. You imagine these crates boarding ships. Storms rat salt air. Some never made it, others did. And from those humble sacks the chocolate industry was born. Not in a market stall, not in a royal court, but here on docks like this, in cities like this, carried by hands who knew its worth. You wake to a quiet drizzle tapping against the rooftops, and for a moment the past and present blend. The scent in the air is earthy, wet, stone-damp leaves, and faintly chocolate. But not the imperial kind, not the ceremonial drink of priests and emperors. This is something humbler, simpler, and surprisingly still alive. You've wandered into a neighbourhood preparing for a feast, not a royal banquet, something more communal. The scent leads you to an open kitchen where women stir massive clay pots filled with a sauce so thick it clings to the ladle in ribbons. A man leans over and grins. Mole Negro, he says. You blink. Mole as in the modern Mexican sauce served with chicken laced with spices and chocolate. Exactly. You're looking at one of the most flavourful descendants of the ancient Xocolatl tradition. Malaya dish of immense pride, complexity, and yes, chocolate blends, indigenous culinary roots with colonial influences. Ground chilies, garlic, sesame seeds, almonds, raisins, tomatoes, plantains, cloves, cinnamon, and just at the end, a touch of cacao. Not to sweeten it, but to deepen it. That's the secret. In Mole, cacao doesn't shout. It hums in the background, tying the ingredients together like a bass line in a song. You take a bite, tender chicken bathed in the sauce. The taste hits in waves, smoky, earthy, spicy, and subtly bitter. Not sweet at all. It's grown-up chocolate. Chocolate with a story. Historians still argue how and when chocolate entered savoury cuisine. Some claim mole was invented in colonial Puebla by nuns improvising a dish for a visiting bishop. Others say it evolved slowly over centuries, blending indigenous spice traditions with New World ingredients like nuts and fruit. But the truth probably lies, as it often does, somewhere in between. Because mole, like Xocolatl, is a reflection of history, layers upon layers, ritual and adaptation, memory and flavour. It's a dish that remember, 7 when the eaters don't. You sip from a small cup of champorado next to another chocolate drink, but this one is thickened with masa, the same cornmeal used for tortillas. It's hot, comforting, spiced with cinnamon, and sweetened with a touch of piloncillo sugar. A far cry from Montezuma's foamy brew, yet still recognizable. The soul of it remains. Someone hands you a pan de muerto, bread of the dead, a staple of Dia de los Muertos. You smile. Even in modern festivals honouring ancestors, cacao finds its way into the offerings. Sometimes as drinks, sometimes as candies, sometimes as actual beans laid reverently beside framed photos of the departed. Because cacao isn't just food, it's a link, a gesture, a remembrance. You wander the markets of modern Oaxaca, now past stalls selling spiced chocolate discs wrapped in waxy paper, past cafes offering iced cacao drinks and mole tamales, and past murals bright defiant, showing farmers with baskets of cacao quetzalcoatl soaring in feathers above them. It's clear the legacy lives on. Even as global brands churn out chocolate bars by the ton, there are still places where the bean is honoured. Grown carefully, roasted slowly, ground by hand, made into drinks that don't pretend to be sweet or simple, just honest. You pick up a small bag of cacao criollo, one of the oldest cultivated strains. It smells like earth and fruit and thyme. The vendor nods at you, knowingly, as if to say, this one remembers. And you realise something. Despite conquest, trade smuggling and sugar-coated reinventions, the original spirit of Aztec chocolate, bitter, bold, ceremonial, never fully disappeared. It just hid itself in sauces and rituals, in family recipes and street stalls, in mole, in champorado, in memory. And maybe that's the real magic of cacao. It doesn't just taste good, it endures. The sky's dark now, starlit and silent, and your journey feels like it's curling in on itself, coming full circle. You're sitting once again with a clay cup between your hands. But this time, you're not in the heart of Tenochtitlan, nor a smoky jungle grove. You're in the liminal space between past and present, between history and dream. Inside your cup is a familiar scent, cacao, of course, but it's more than that. It's memory. You swirl the liquid gently, watching the soft ripples dance. There's no foam this time, no chili bite, no bark floating on the surface, but still something stirs. You've followed cacao across empires and oceans, from sacred altars to market stalls, from grinding stones to pirate ships, and everywhere it's gone, it has absorbed pieces of the people who held it, their hopes, their habits, their beliefs. Now you sip and you think of the things we'll never fully know. Because for all that's been studied, every codex, every recipe, every colonial record, there are still mysteries. There were likely hundreds of regional variations of exocolatl lost to time, ingredients no one wrote down, techniques passed through generations, in whispers and practice, not ink. There might have been a flower perhaps once ground into the cacao mix for its scent now extinct, a kind of bark that gave the drink a reddish hue, or maybe a rare jungle seed that offered a sweet note, one last gentle touch before bitterness set in. Historians still argue whether one of these now vanished ingredients is the true secret to ancient Aztec chocolate, something that gave it that special edge, that soul-deep richness modern drinks never quite replicate. It's not in the sugar, it's not in the cinnamon, it's in something older, quieter, something forgotten. Maybe it wasn't even an ingredient at all. Maybe it was the ceremony, the careful grinding, the silent stirring, the whispered blessing before the first sip. Maybe the magic was in the making. You glance down at your cup. The drink is gone, but the warmth lingers. Cacao has always been about more than flavour. It's been a currency, a comfort, a spiritual vessel, a political tool, a point of pride, and through every era, Maya, Aztec, Spanish, modernit, has remained stubbornly itself. Adaptable, humble, powerful. The beans still grow, the traditions still whisper, the drinks still soothe. And you, quiet in your chair, or tucked beneath your covers, have walked the entire path. From root to ritual, from emperor's gold to everyday mug. You know now that the secret ingredient in Aztec hot chocolate might never be named. Because it wasn't a spice or a petal or a drop of blood. It was meaning. And in that sense, maybe it still survives every time someone brews a cup, not for speed or sugar, but for comfort ceremony, or simply to remember. You lean back, eyes heavy, breath soft. The cacao has done its work. Now that our story has come to a close, let's slow everything down. Let your shoulders relax. Let the rhythm of your breath soften. You've travelled through centuries tonight, walked sunlit markets, touched jungle pods, tasted drinks both bitter and bright. There's no need to hold on to the details anymore. Just let the warmth remain. Picture yourself once more by a quiet fire, hands curled around that clay cup. The city is hushed. The lake lies still. Somewhere, a distant drum echoes gently like a heartbeat, like footsteps receding into the past. You are safe here between stories. The people you met, the merchants, the grinders, the emperors, the priests, they've all drifted back into history now, but their echoes linger. In every sip of warm chocolate, in every recipe passed from hand to hand, their legacy lives on. Let your mind soften. Let your body sink a little deeper into comfort. If your eyes are still open, let them close. If they're already shut, let them stay that way. There's nothing else to do. Nothing more to learn tonight. Just quiet. Just warmth. Just the slow, gentle lull of memory folding into sleep. And if in the dreams ahead you find yourself in a stone courtyard, foam rising in a clay bowl, and someone offers you a drink smile, you already know what's in it.